All right. Hi, everyone. So let's see who we got here. Sarah, Olive, Karen, Wei, and Linda. So I once went to a wedding, and my friend asked me if I would be their, their minister or something. And so I got the life ministry certification online, and I became a minister so I can facilitate their wedding or officiate their wedding. And I was kind of nervous. I'm sitting there with my suit, and I'm standing by the area where they're getting married, and I'm writing all these notes and putting into words and articulation everything that I'm going to say. And I put it down, and I walk somewhere, and I come back, and I can't find my note. And the wedding is in like 10 minutes or something like that. And I felt so nervous. And I just had to, because I had no choice, I had to completely let go of the mind, of the control and the prescribed answers for what I was going to say and how I was going to say it. And all I did is I just allowed myself to tap into the vibration, the resonance of the wedding, and the resonance of my intention in officiating the wedding for them. And what I found was, it's not just that everything came to me that felt authentic to say. Life also facilitated the oration to happen on its own. Like, I didn't need notes in front of me because the trees and the audience and their little girl and them, like everyone in their own way, in my own openness, became, what are those words? I don't have words today. Those little cards that you read that tell you what to say and when to say it. Just by being open to the moment and feeling genuine in myself. Note cards. All of life was a big note card for me. And it was a beautiful wedding and a beautiful officiation. In a moment, I'll share with you my chart. So I will be sharing my screen with you in a moment. But I'll share another example. Just last night, I was gathering and had a song circle with some friends of mine in the house that I'm living right now. And I knew that Venus, right now Venus is in Pisces, was going to be squaring my Uranus. I have Uranus in Sagittarius. I knew that it would be squaring that last night. Actually, I'll pull up my chart now so everyone can see this. Okay. I'll pull up the transits. Okay. Let's do screen share. How do I do that again? Hey, Linda, how do I do the screen share?
Yeah, just click on share screen, the green box at the bottom.
The bottom. Oh, I see.
And then choose the application that you want.
Got it. Okay. Okay. So you see my Uranus in Sag in the 3rd house, right there.
Okay. Yeah.
And here's transiting Neptune. So last night, Venus was at 9 degrees. And it was exactly squaring my Uranus. So I was curious what would happen. Of course, song circle with community, Venus and Uranus, community and Venus's song, and it's in Pisces. And so it's, of course, we're singing lots of spiritual songs and things like that. But pretty much almost at the exact time of this square, I witnessed a very interesting phenomena. My friend sang a song, and then my other friend got so excited. He said, that just reminded me of this song that I forgot. that I could not remember just came back to me. And I wrote in my journal something that I've already been just sort of being with in preparation for today, that life holds the pieces. We don't have to hold it all. The things that we don't know, the things that we can't quite grasp or place or remember, life holds it for us. And that impulse to want to grab it, to want to know it, to want to control it, to seek understanding, it's using our own personal energy and our own personal will to bring some sort of clarity and resolution. But everything in life is contained within everything. Everything is holding the information for all of itself. And that's the bigger teaching of Uranus that we'll come back to. But for now, I'll say Uranus is community, not just me and my friends, but life. Life is a huge community. All of existence is one giant ecosystem. And so within this ecosystem, everything is taken into account. Within our own limited subjective perceptions, we will often think of things as lost, or some things as having relevance in the moment and other things not. But nothing really is lost. And there's no individual organism within creation that isn't held and contained and met by all the other organisms. And we can think of it just as we think of it as a forest. And how in a forest, every species lives in relationship to all the other species. It's such an inherent truth. Everything is symbiotic. And the same thing is also true in the universe, in the stars, in the solar systems, that there's an orbital relationship between all the planets, and they all share in this path around the sun and the galaxies with one another. There's always relationship. And yeah, in our own minds, and there's something we often do with Uranus, will create this sense of separation where the community of life is blocked and suppressed. We don't perceive it, we don't recognize it. And so we create a notion of community that's just a metaphor to the true community. And the ways in which we'll do that will be by way of the associations we make with the lifestyle that we're living and the world that we're a part of. And it's basically a way of excluding everyone and everything and choosing to focus on, this is my support network. These are my people. These are the ways in which I'm going to move about and see my reality. The principle of synchronicity, which ultimately states that everything in the outer reality is a reflection of the inner. And oftentimes the local logical mind can't trace these things. But the more our own consciousness is relaxed and not holding on to an individual sense of me and the world that I think it is, but it's open to, this is my world, this is our world, this is the only one reality. And I want to say that, and I'll come back to my stories in a moment, Uranus and Neptune both have something to do with oneness. The oneness in Neptune is sort of just like the oneness. There's only one. In the way that you can look at all the individual waves and say, okay, it's all water. And so with Neptune, we find the transcendent, like the essential source of and within all things can be found in and of all things. That's where Neptune reflects the possibility of transcendence. We can transcend limitations of time and space, of self and other, because we are all of the same essence, and that essence is available always. And all kinds of miracles happen with Neptune. Uranus is about the oneness in the sense that it reflects the principle that we are all one. We, all of us individuals, like this huge community of life, we're all one. So it's more this principle of oneness that implies relationship of individuals. but it's a geometric matrix and synergy of individuals. It's not a bunch of separate pieces, and that's what we often do in our subjective perception of reality and of ourselves. We'll think of it as separate pieces, and to a relative degree, think of some pieces as more relevant to us than others. And what we do when we hold that view is we often will just walk through life with a deep sense of, I don't belong here, or you don't belong here, or, this is not where I'm meant to be, or I don't fit in here, or you don't fit in, or I'm looking for my people. Because we're holding on to this limited notion of belonging. The deepest truth of Uranus is the essence of belonging. It's just belonging. This is belonging. And so coming back to last night, he shared that song that he remembered. And then I remembered a song that I didn't even know that I forgot. And I shared it. And it was like this, also a Uranian thing. It became this like contagion. He remembered a song, I remembered a song. The vibration of that was bringing out the energy of song remembrance. And if you ever had these experiences in the past, when you're in a relatively relaxed state, you might have these flashes or moments of the past come through your mind. And it might feel completely non sequitur. Like, where did this come from? That often happens to me when I'm in a deeply relaxed state. I'll just have memories. And a part of why it doesn't make sense is because the logical, rational mind doesn't place it, because our general perception of things is according to the logical constructs that we've established. But the energies that's arising in the moment, it's a part of simply the amazing complex of reality that includes all things that ever were and ever will be. And this is totally beyond time. So I'm going to stop right there and tune back in, because there's a lot that I want to explore here. We'll come back to time in a moment, and then we'll start talking a little bit more about the awakening thing, and a little bit about the evolutionary stages. I want to tune into my chart a little bit. So let me just pull up my chart by itself. Okay. So we have Uranus and Sag in the third house. Part of what happened for me when I was doing that wedding, if you think about Uranus and Sag in the third, I didn't need to have an answer. Uranus in Sag in the third can have very brilliant, nice sounding answers and have a very well articulated complex of thoughts in the mind. This is like a thing with Uranus. Wherever Uranus is where there can be a kind of brilliance and intelligence. Then you can see that Uranus is on my south node. So that's been a part of my journey in the past. Earlier in this lifetime, I still do. I'm into astrology. I gravitated towards Talmud. I got really deeply into the Talmud study. And Talmud, for those who don't know, in Judaism, it's a way of reading different teachings from the rabbis a long time ago. And you'll have commentaries from different generations around the main text, quoting sources from prior generations and then future generations, all from like a few hundred BC to like well into the Middle Ages. And they're written in different scripts, Aramaic, different scripts of Hebrew, different like ways of actually writing the letters. And I loved it because it was about holding a lot of thoughts in my head at once and cross-referencing. We had to have a larger view of many facets of Jewish teachings, Jewish law, Jewish story, Agada, even some Kabbalistic teachings will come into that every once in a while. And I was just so into that. Of course, what I realized at a certain point, it was creating a focus point for my mind where my frame of reference for reality was limited to the knowledge that I was directing my attention towards. And so to get an answer would require looking in a book. Uranus in the third house. Remember that we have a tendency to focus on the metaphor for Uranus. And what we're always doing in our own awakening is we're liberating from the metaphor, realizing that we are taking it as literal. And that the literal doesn't have a context. I'm going to come back to that in a moment, so it doesn't sound too abstract. I'll share a similar story. Uranus in the third house in Sag. Last 2 years ago, when Neptune was squaring my Uranus, my computer crashed. And I didn't know what I was going to do because I had sessions scheduled. So I decided to just give readings without astrology because it's a little bit too complicated to figure out a way to, I have a solar fire and I wasn't able to access my solar fire. I actually wasn't even able to access Skype or anything like that. So I think I just made phone calls and I didn't record it and I didn't look at a chart. And I just told them, pay what you can, here's what we're going to do. And those sessions were really powerful. But, and this is common for all of us, relative to the fear of the unknown, like the insecurity of being in the unknown, which really ultimately links with this deep fear of not belonging. Like if we really follow our path, if we follow what's authentic to us, there's a deeper fear of I won't fit into anything. And so we will default to kind of reverting back to the known and what we can do well. And with me, Sun Uranus in the South Node, it's clear that for lifetimes I've been identified with the intellect, with a brilliant mind, with what I can do with it, with how much information I can hold, and my ability to see an objective picture and all that kind of stuff. So I eventually, came back to doing astrology readings. Over time, I've been liberating from that identity of astrologer. Liberating from the identity that what I'm sharing with you comes from the natal chart. And I had a dream 2 nights ago where I'm with a group of people, and it's a little vague, the dream, but it really reflects what's emerging in my consciousness right now. I was basically telling a group of people, and they were all telling me, we're all having the same realization, that we don't have to identify ourselves with any role in order to be in service to this world. That we can completely strip ourselves free of any role at all. And there's something that was really liberating, clear in that dream, and I'm not accessing it fully in this moment. The next day, a woman called me and asked me if I would, and this is what she said, something like, will you be my guide, friend, beloved, support, companion, and work with me in some way or another every so often to help me come into my own soul's calling? And I said, that sounds so great. And what was so nice about that is it really had nothing to do with, will you do an intuitive guidance session with me? Will you read my chart? Will you teach me astrology? But it will include all of that. And with my Uranus Sun conjunction in Sag in the third house, it's liberating from any context of this is the role that I play in this world. This is what I know, and this is the context for what I know and the way that I get what I know. Liberating myself from that framework. And so what I found so breathtaking, liberating is it's an opportunity to be present and to not know what I'm going to say, but to work with the energy of the moment and letting life hold the guidance, letting life hold the answer and direct the show. Like at the wedding, the moment truly led the way. And like that song circle, the remembering of that song came to me and my friend just by being present in the community vibe. And so with Uranus, as we replace the metaphor with an understanding of the literal, we realize we don't have to hold on. This holding on is really a projection of the mind. where we place our own identity in a definition, in a context. And that context basically says, this is who I am. This is how I operate. These are the conditions in which I am a social being operating in relation to this world. And the fear of letting go of that context, and we can only let go if it's authentic, of course. The fear of letting go of that context is not having a context. It's as simple as that, which brings up this ultimate sense of not belonging. And that's where within consciousness we gravitate towards a Saturn dimension, which is structure, time and space. Basically something to hold on to, a way to know ourselves, a way to define ourselves, all the while suppressing our inherent soul individuality. And so I'm gonna shift dimensions a little bit here, but I also want to say, as I'm speaking, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. Everyone is invited to jump in at any moment if you have a question for me, or want to just ask anything. Okay, am I back on the screen?
Yes, okay.
Good. Okay. I'm going to share a couple more things that are here now. Part of what I find is this an interesting part of my journey is where there's an impulse to want to organize everything ahead of time. And then when I realize that it's not authentic, in the moment something genuine comes through. And that's a big piece with Uranus and Sag in the third. It's spontaneous thought, not planned thought. So with Uranus, there's a journey of revelation. There's a journey of liberation that happens in different ways for everyone. And that will often express as, we'll find a community, we'll join with a group of people where the thoughts, the ways of being are more evolved, more liberated, more free than the status quo. And yet, it's not ever about just staying there. For most souls on this planet, we're going to find our group, we're going to find our people. And wherever we have Uranus in our chart, in some way it's going to reflect, one of two things, and we can get stuck in these places. One, finding our people, our friends, our groups, our teachers, our modalities, and that becoming this symbol of liberation and awakening that we hold on to. And it's good to have these close relationships to it, but it can get to a point where then we're suppressing our own natural soul individuality. Or on the other end, we're in this perpetual state of resistance to being a part of joining anything. But what happens when we're in that state of resistance, we end up closing ourselves from the network of community that is a part of creation. So we join community, we're part of these networks. We never have to exclude ourselves from it. Life never excludes itself from anything. But the key is to maintain inwardly detached from identification with it. And that allows the sharing air sign, the sharing and the growth and the connection to happen, and the synchronicities and the links to happen in their own way, but not trying to make it something that it's not. And we easily do that wherever Uranus is in place. Uranus in the first house, I have this purpose I'm going to achieve, and suddenly we're holding on to this thing that we're not meant to be holding on to. It becomes another idea, a projection of the mind. Uranus in the seventh, this is who I'm supposed to be for you, or this is what relationship means. Or the complete opposite, I don't want to have anything to do with anyone. Jeff Green often talks about Uranus as where we will not want to contend or just deal with certain things. Right? We'll find it less evolved or petty or just something that is wasting our precious time and energy. And what that reflects is, it's often coming from a deeper trauma, but what's happening is we're separating ourselves from that one community. And we're thus not really allowing our own soul to evolve because we're seeing some things as relevant and some things as not relevant. It would be inaccurate for me to say Talmud is irrelevant or astrology is irrelevant. Of course, that's totally an absurd way of thinking. So on my path, as I'm finding that my role in life is freeing itself from astrologer, it's not about chucking astrology, because astrology reflects the truths of creation, and Talmud reflects this as well. Everything reflects truth, but nothing's it. Nothing is the thing. So if we're called to a thing, a person, a path, the key is keeping the mind open and using it, relating to it, not holding it as if we have arrived at the thing. And that's where, again, the metaphor becomes literal. And then at a certain point, we find ourselves feeling suppressed or not included for who we are. We don't resonate with the community or with our partner or with our life path or with our work or with our family. It's because at some point we began suppressing what is true for us. So I want to speak about the idea of soul individuality. Each soul has its own individuality, and it's not a thing that develops. And we can just think of it as our true nature. Like our true nature, what we are, our soul, is what it is. It always has been and it always will be. Personality develops, right? Our sense of self grows, but our true soul essence, like its actual nature, the nature itself doesn't change. In a sense, all of our many, many personalities and lifetimes are always reflecting that soul individuality, right? And this soul's desire to know itself and to awaken to itself, which brings us into these incarnations. But that true essential soul individuality is, in a sense, always being pointed to. And in all of these lifetimes, we can look at that Uranus signature, in a sense, as reflecting where we can trace and point back to what we are when we're not trying to find a context for ourselves, meaning just what we actually are. So I have a friend that's a hypnotherapist. And she said something really interesting. She notices when people have memories of the past, they are more likely to remember details of things that they can recall, those details only being limited. Like if you remember something that happened to you when you were 4, you're only going to remember small pieces of that. Like when your mother left you in nursery school and you're left alone, you're not going to remember the full story. In fact, the more traumatic an experience, or the more emotionally charged and incapable of integration we were in that moment, the least we will be capable of remembering what actually happened. And she said the things that we don't remember, interestingly, are more accurate than the things that we do remember, because they're not tailored, they're not limited by an exclusive memory. And that exclusive memory is Mercury. We have the memory of what we recall, what we can identify with the mind. And what we identify with the mind is emotionally what we're able to integrate and recall. But on the level of Uranus, there isn't a specific linear memory of certain things that happened, because Uranus doesn't consider time. There's no process. There's just the field of soul reality experience always happening in every moment. And when we tune into the Uranus dimension, things that happen in our life are not linear events. Like this person comes to me and gives me a piece of carrot cake and I eat it and I say thank you and it tasted really good. Everything that happened is an expression of the giant grid of community in interrelationship with one another. The Saturn dimension gives the perception of form and structure and time and pieces and components coming together and relating. And thus we give it definitions. But what's actually happened just beyond the appearance of the forms that we identify with are just pure archetypal energies, completely impersonal, including ourself, completely impersonal, playing itself out with itself. It's the one ecosystem operating in relation to itself. And the more we can see that, because we're not giving it a personal context, we're seeing it as it is. We're not attaching an identity to it. The more we find that in our awareness of it, we become more receptive and tuned into the actual nature of reality, the actual individuality of all things. And then life on its own gets to work out and kind of show us the pieces. And that's why you often find when people have an awakening experience, it's very common for them to just start having flashes of past lives, or for all of us that are in this awakening journey, we'll often have spontaneous memories or flashes of past lives. And like I said, it doesn't always feel secular, it doesn't always feel relevant to this present moment, but it's not about what our local mind is able to hold or identify or understand. It's really about there are just archetypal energies of creation. That is what all of creation is. So in a sense, a part of how I see this phase of awakening with Uranus, it's coming to a place in our own journey where we realize we don't have to hold on to the metaphor. We don't have to hold on to the control of creating a limited context for our life and how we live and what we do and who we are. And we oftentimes think of awakening as a goal or a process of somewhere that we need to get. And that's the biggest mistake and delusion in a sense. That's what keeps us from continuing on this path. A perspective I want to offer on the evolutionary stages that Jeff Green teaches. When we come into the spiritual stages of evolution, as he teaches it, it's a very Virgo kind of phase. So it's very easy during that phase to hold an inner sense of doubt, to hold a sense of I am lacking something and I have to purify. I can't tell you how many times people say to me, and I've even held this, it's my karma to play it out. Thing is, the second we realize that it's our karma, we're not as bound by it. What we ultimately realize about creation that we don't at first understand is that karma is not in its truth, in its essence, about certain things need to happen inherently. The only true reality of karma is relative to our own inner consciousness. So it's the nature of our consciousness that requires, that demands from life certain kinds of experiences to reflect back to us our consciousness. So if you had a lifetime of lots of arrogance and there's an inward guilt and deep self-reflection around that, we might very likely create a lifetime or two of intense humbling. The karma isn't now we have to be humble because we are arrogant. The karma is in our inner consciousness, we have only known ourselves in a certain way. And the extent to which we're holding on to that duality and that polarity, and we think that there's, let's say it's an Aquarius Leo axis. If we're holding on to a lot of the Leo energy and we haven't been able to integrate the rest of the truth, which is also Aquarius, then we'll be creating these lifetimes just to reflect back to us we have not seen. The second we realize that, I have this karma around community and belonging. The second we realize that, if we can see that it's not a necessity, that we have to go through this, but rather in our awareness of it, we can actually shift and integrate more self-knowledge in that moment. That's when the karmic dynamics actually begin to change in our life. What really starts to shift as we enter second stage spiritual, and this is something that I'm learning, I'm discovering this, is we begin to recognize that the totality of life as we've been perceiving it has been limited to a very subjective notion where everything's related back to ourself and how we're doing. And that the way that we relate to one another, the way that we relate to our work and to our relationships and to our body have all been limited to a very ingrained orientation to think in terms of our own limited self. And what it's constantly doing is basically saying, I don't inherently trust that this moment, that this reality can kind of hold it all for me. And so we create all these different stories and projections that will keep us safe from the larger unknown of reality. And Uranus is called freedom from the known. And if you really want to think about that, it's freedom from the known. So all the things that we know and that we think we have to know. Because if we don't know it, we're not going to be safe. We're not going to belong. We're not going to have a place. We're not going to fill in the blank. Whatever we fill in the blank, those are the conditionalities that we create. With my Uranus, Sun, and Sag in the third house, people won't believe me. If I don't have something to say, then I won't be adored, respected, appreciated. People won't think I'm intelligent. These are all the limiting notions that I create and that I carry around with me, and that but in the past to a significant degree, I've unconsciously used as a reference for my own identity. When we realize that the whole life we've been experiencing has depended upon this perpetual sustaining of an identity structure, when we see that, we can actually just let go.
Ari, would you like to share some of your ideas on Chiron and how Chiron is the bridge from Saturn to Uranus? Maybe?
I can. Nothing comes up. I mean, if there's like a question or a, let me just sit with it. If I or someone else has something to say, but let's just hold that there for a moment.
Okay, thanks.
And I just want to share another point of self-awareness that I feel is valuable to share with the group. It's very much again about my Uranus. When I stop talking and I just decide to be present and just be here, and I choose very intentionally the energy of contentment and openness, I'll say it this way, when I don't choose that, and the reason why I don't choose that when I don't, is because of the fears that I spoke about. Like, what if I don't have something to say? What will everyone think? They'll be disappointed with all of this stuff, which just comes back to the conditionality that I create in my own mind. So there's this experience of literally not knowing, coming back to the unknown. Within my own soul knowledge is a very deep knowing and understanding of Uranus and what it represents within consciousness. And within the collective field between all of us, there's enough interest and life experience and resonance for there to be a lot of direct learning. So I just want to share that. That's something that I'm learning, that I don't have to operate in that place of mental energy, but can come back to the moment and see what comes through there.
Hi, may I ask a question about just what you said about Uranus is more like a essence of the soul. It's like individuality of the soul. And what's the relationship between that and our self-image? Because like recently, what's that relationship of Uranus and our self-image of the ego, like moon?
Okay.
Yeah, because for me, I feel my Uranus is very on the very mental level, but I feel that is me. Then what is this ego about?
Great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I want to use it. I'm glad you asked that. I'll use those two phrases very differently here. When we're looking at the idea of identity according to, from the level of Uranus, I'm specifically speaking about projection. And everything has to be related back to the moon ultimately, because that moon at the core is emotional integration. So nothing doesn't get by the moon when it comes to integrating everything in our journey. But we can think of the moon in its essence as like how I'm going to feel safe right now. So you can think of the moon relative to Uranus as whatever projections you're creating that basically says, this is my community, or this is how I live, or this is who I have to be. The moon will then be the emotional filter that we'll be holding that will allow us to feel safe and create a world that protects us around that. And we can do that with the moon and any planet. Like whatever dynamic we experience with that planet, we can then come back to the moon and the moon is going to protect it. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense. Thank you.
Can we look at your chart, Wei?
Sure.
Only if you have a question or if that's there for you.
Do I have to share my chart, or do you just need the Uranus position of my chart?
Whatever feels authentic to you.
Okay, I'll just I'll just share because Uranus is very important in my chart. It rules Jupiter in the first house Aquarius, squaring the nodes, and the Uranus is located in 11th house Sagittarius, and the moon is in 4th house Taurus. So it's very different energy. It's just like a very liberating part. Then this moon asks so much security. I think that's the conflict I feel.
Mm-hmm. Does your Uranus inconjunct the moon at all?
I think it's by quintile.
Okay. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the other thing that I want to say about Uranus, from the point of view of the moon, from the point of view of the individual identity that we create in each lifetime, there's that sense of there being lifetimes. So this lifetime, the past lifetime, and future lifetime. But literally from the soul's actual perspective, there are lifetimes. We create that notion of lifetimes. And when I say we are the soul, right? So we create this notion of lifetime relative to our identification with this form. But the soul itself is just the soul. It's just on this continual journey. And so in a sense, what happens with Uranus is we begin to awaken to something that feels simultaneously ancient, like profoundly ancient, that it's so familiar to us. And at the same time, something that we've never seen before. Because on the one hand, it's what we always have been. And at the same time, we have not ever fully just been it. The soul individuality has been expressed through the filter of different ideas of self. And so when we come into the awakening, like the moon doesn't go away, the ego structure doesn't go away, but it's the point we begin to know ourselves as a human being. Our own sense of self, moon, our own ego structure becomes linked with the soul. The actual beginning of soul knowledge happens in that point, where this individual human self is not separate. When we start to see ourselves as a soul, the soul itself is not just this individual separate organism. So that really opens us to the potential of community. So we got Way's chart up here. So we have Uranus in Sag in the 11th. We have Jupiter in Aquarius squaring the nodes. Yeah, I love your chart, Way, because it's such a rich Aquarian type chart.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's got a lot of that. Well, I don't know what to say, but let's see if anything wants to be said. I think in so many ways, this lifetime, and I know we've spoken to this and you got this already, but it really is about not knowing. Like it just really is about not knowing. And finding your own truth, your own path, independent of any existing culture or way of thinking. And it's clear that your soul is deeply drawn to, that Pluto sun and Scorpio in the ninth, to us most, for example, the EA teachings and whatever you're called to gather the pieces of your own self-remembering. But with that Jupiter squaring the node, then it's applied through your south node. It's kind of like, what is it like to have direction when you don't have any answers outside of yourself? When there's no one outside of you saying or validating, this is where to go, or this is what to think about you. And I think that can bring up such a deep sense of anxiety, especially with Aquarius in the first house. It's like to really not know anything other than this moment. And the temptation there to create something besides this moment, to create some sort of direction, some way of thinking, a belief, Jupiter in Sagittarius in the 11th, a belief about who you are, where you're going, what's up with your life. And a part of this is it's alienating yourself from the fullness of what you are, from your own soul individuality, all for the sake of some sense of belonging, all for the sake of fitting into something that seems to make sense, that you can hold on to.
Yeah, that's really, yeah, that's reflecting. Yeah, and I just want to share, when you're talking about that, I remembered last EA meeting, you talk about the story, you are spending a night in the park and meet someone, just they lead you to a sleeping place, and I'm thinking like, oh my God, that's like, I wish I could do that. I wish I could have the courage, have just to go with the flow.
It's a great example. I really want to offer this as an empowerment, but I recognize the immensity of this for you. But it's a powerful intention and signature, but it's also very clear this is what this life is about.
Mm-hmm.
That, like, most people in this world need to know where they're going.
Yeah.
Like, most people really need to know that. But at a certain point, it becomes totally useless. And I just really see that for you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
And this may be a question for others as well. I'm not as Uranian as Wei, but I have my Uranus in the 6th house. And I noticed in your chart that Uranus was in 3rd house. And so it's visible to the ascendant. So it's something that your experience is maybe it has an easier time tuning into because of just of its position in your chart. What if someone has the Uranus natally in the 6th or the 8th or the 12th? It's not visible by the, the 1st house. I'm in a Uranian moment with Uranus transiting over my ascendant this year and next. Or last year and this year, excuse me. So I'm curious about just how how it's experienced by someone when it's in that natal 6th, 8th, and 12th relative to what you're sharing here, because I sense that there's a stronger connection because of where it sits in your natal chart, and that kind of had me wondering about just by the natal position. Thank you.
Will you clarify to me who is talking, by the way? What's your name?
Sarah West.
Oh, Sarah. Okay.
Yeah.
Will you clarify what you mean when you say visible to the ascendant?
So the 6th house is in conjunct to the 1st, just like the 8th. So it's not visible, as they say.
Okay.
And the 12th also is more because of where it sits in the 12th. Does that make sense?
Yeah, got it.
Okay.
Can you, Sarah, can we get your chart up? Can I pull up your chart?
Yes, if Linda has it. I don't have it myself.
Yeah,
Give it to me.
She has it.
I'll work on getting it, Ari. Just keep talking and I'll get the chart.
Sure.
Okay.
I'll give you my natal positions to get started. The Uranus, my Uranus is at 8 degrees, 30 some minutes or whatever of Libra, 6th house.
Okay.
And my ascendant is 24 degrees Aries.
Okay. 8 degrees Libra, 6th house. Okay. I'm gonna wait until your chart because it's just looking at that by itself really wouldn't tell me anything about what it means.
Right.
But I'm going to speak to that ascendant question. I think that's interesting. First, in my chart, it's on the south node and it's conjunct the sun and Jupiter. So it's like it's super present for me, which means it's like there's a lot for me to liberate from. You could say also that this is like that Uranian metaphor way of living is very ingrained in me. So there's a letting go of a lot of intellectual identity for me, a lot of the need to protect and hide myself in a facade of knowing or in a show of knowing. In general, let me just tune into what this means. When you have Uranus in one of those positions that you're calling visible to the ascendant, what this simply would mean on the most basic level, and the application of it will totally be different for every single person, every single soul. But what this means is that there'll be, because it's going to be a trine or a sextile pretty much in relationship to the ascendant for the most part. And so that means there'll be ease of access in terms of acting on ascendant, acting on it, integrating, doing something with the need to move forward or liberate or join the community or work through certain traumas. If it's in an inconjunct relationship, such as a 6th house or a semi-sextile, such as the 12th house, etc., that just means the ascendant will only be speaking to in terms of how we move forward with our life, like how we're activating and creating direction and momentum in our life. We would also really want to look at the ruler of the ascendant and how it's doing with Mars in terms of our ability to make choices relative to the Uranian impulses. But yeah, it could be a little stressful and difficult to grab it if it's in that.
Sure. Yes. The ruler of my ascendant is Mars at 2 degrees Pisces, which squares out of sign Neptune in Scorpio at 29 degrees.
Oh, here we go.
There you go.
Okay.
See that?
Okay, so let's look. Let's see. Where's your south node's in Virgo in the 5th? Okay. You have Venus squaring the node in the 9th. Resolution node is the south node. North node in Pisces in the 11th, ruled by Neptune, which is approaching a square to the nodes. So it's approaching a square. It's definitely within the energy of it. In Neptune and Scorpio in the 8th. Okay. Pluto in Virgo in the 6th, Uranus right there. Libra in the 6th. Okay. And your Mars is approaching an inconjunct with your Uranus. So what would you like me to speak to, Sarah?
Yeah, just when the Uranus is sitting in that kind of inconjunct position to the ascendant,
Well, it's not in conjunct the ascendant though. It's like it's nice archetypally, and that has resonance of it, and that there's truth in that. But it's not actually in conjunct the ascendant.
Okay, just by house then, I guess. Maybe that's where I'm coming up with this.
I mean, just in general, and that I agree that resonance would be there because it's like the archetypes line up. That would just mean when it comes to acting upon. So we have it's actually a little relevant for you because you have that Mars ruling your ascendant in Pisces in the 11th, which is also an Aquarian house. It's approaching and in conjunct with your Uranus in the 6th. So what this reflects for you is there can become, in terms of moving forward with the work that you're doing in this life and actually giving yourself permission to follow your own calling instead of fitting into an existing box that you know you can do that others accept. It's actually having the bravery and the courage to move forward and not even know what that's going to look like. But a part of that is facing an inner self and a fear of moving forward on your own. That's one layer of it that I can see with that. And if you want to speak to me a little bit about how this is showing up for you, I can go a little bit deeper.
Oh yeah, this is showing up in spades. Yeah, because I had my own spiritual experience, and I've talked about it in other EA Zoom meetings, and I'm writing a book about that. And so I'm having to really let go of my corporate, life that's been secure to take time to do that. I've not completely released the reins of the corporate life and secure paycheck, but this project is significant for me to do, and it really is about liberating myself and what I think is the safe place to go. So yeah,
totally.
It's right on the nose. Okay.
That's really the essence of that. I would say, in the way I read it, is the Mars moving towards an inconjunct towards your Uranus. And that Mars ruling the ascendant further emphasizes that, and that having that archetypal inconjunct to Uranus in the 6th. But then we also have Uranus, which is in conjunct with Mars, squaring all of, your Capricorn midheaven and your Mercury. So that's like really also embodying your own authority and creating direction for yourself, trusting your own inner guide, focusing your mind, trusting your ability. But the Mars really implies you have to be able to go alone. You have to break free from what you know and forgive yourself fundamentally for it. And that Libra in the 6th would bring up trauma around comparison, trying to be what you're not for the sake of others and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, good for you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Ari, would you then say that Chiron in Aries in the 12th house could be a stepping stone to one of the stepping stones towards Uranus? It's opposite. Chiron opposite Uranus.
What do you mean by stepping stone?
Well, just as it's the bridge, isn't it? From between Saturn and Uranus, Chiron is the bridge. So
here's what I think of when I think of your Chiron as a bridge.
Okay.
And I'd love to hear what you think of also, Linda, when you see that.
Well, simply what I said. Just a helpful way to go, to get closer, to feel that freedom, to allow yourself that freedom. Chiron could be seen as something that will be helpful. In getting there.
I agree. I want to speak to this in my words, how it resonates for me.
Okay.
The profound vulnerability that comes with Chiron is where, and it's a profoundly integrative function. It's not about just liberating from the known and stripping ourselves from the limiting context that our mind creates, which is Uranus, which sounds fun and easy, right? But it's actually not easy because we're not all there. And it's not just about Saturn, which is confining ourselves to, the physical parameters and learning how to be responsible and conscious and masterful in how we're using form and defining our reality in a conscious way. Chiron bridges them in the sense that it's about bringing into formation, actually grounding into this physical reality, something that is not reflected or embodied or mirrored in anyone or anything else. So like the metaphor of if you saw the new Star Wars movie, Rogue One, I won't ruin it for you, but there's a blind guy who does all this cool stuff. And it's because he couldn't see that he was able to tap into the force and use the force and then like do all these really cool things. But if he held the story, I can't see, I'm immobilized, I'm not capable, then he wouldn't have access to medicine that comes with his blindness. So being able to accept our condition, which on a sort of like consensus level, Saturn dimension of consciousness looks like a wound. Nothing looks like a wound on the Uranian level, because wounds really match with time and space. But on the Saturn dimension, we see wounds. We see like there are problems, there are limitations, there are disabilities. But we grab what is beyond the form. We tune into the medicine that we can only access if we look beyond identification with form. And then we can find that there's medicine available through what we've otherwise seen as a disability. So for you, Sarah, part of what I would see with this just what comes to me in this moment is your being alone and not knowing, not having perhaps a confidence in your own ability to do, to act, and to perform. And also, Chiron squares it's approaching a square to your Mercury, it squares your midheaven. I would consider that squaring your Mercury. And it opposes that Uranus, which also squares your Mercury. And it's ruled by that Mars in Pisces in the 11th, which is inconjunct that Uranus. Not having the confidence in your ability to act and to do. And then the temptation within that to perceive yourself, to think of yourself as in some way wounded or incapable. And it feels like the actual will, like your will, and trusting it, trusting the importance and the power and the divinity of your own will. And not needing to make it look like something that you're not. I'll keep that there, but there's a medicine that you access and really coming to terms with the deeper fear in being existentially alone in a core way and not knowing what to do or what choices to make, and actually letting that become your union. Actually, what comes to me around this is it's the choice to return. And the shift for you, if you don't mind me speaking to this, which is coming to me, the shift for you is actually not waiting for or looking for something to open or shift inside or outside for you for the union to take place. The actual healing here is making the choice to almost move yourself into God. It's to make the choice, I'm going to live my awakeness. That life is basically waiting for me to have the confidence in it, to say, I'm going to do this. So it's like stepping into your awakening. And then it gets to meet you there. That's just what comes to me.
It sounds like parts of my book. Oh my gosh.
Let me read it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
We have a question from Crystal. Go ahead, Crystal.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Fabulous. This is my first opportunity to be in on one of these meetings. Okay, so I have a pretty dramatic experience of the Chiron manifestation of Uranus of Aquarius or Uranus and Saturn. I have epilepsy, which is basically the nervous system limitations. And I've had some dramatic changes from that, leading to my more spiritual path. So I have a Pluto conjunct Uranus in Virgo in my 12th house. That is the midpoint of a bunch of other things. My Sun and Mars square in the 10th and 2nd house, which includes its Sun conjunct Jupiter, which is a lot of energy going towards that. It's also the midpoint of...
1 second, let me stop you there. Can I pull up your chart?
Please do, yeah.
Okay, so I'm just going to type, what's your birth data?
It's August 3rd, 1967.
Okay. Time?
11:43. Oh, pardon me. 11:34 a.m. Bellevue, Nebraska, in the United States.
How do you spell Bellevue?
Bellevue.
Okay. All right, I'm going to share my screen. Okay.
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 Great. I'm glad you got it. I also, well, right now I'm going through a dramatic shift of medications for my epilepsy. Now, the only air I have in my chart is my Libra ascendant and the energy of Uranus, basically my most powerful air there. And so I guess I'm interested. It's also, like I said, it's the midpoint of my Moon and Neptune, or pardon me, my Mercury and Neptune.
Okay.
So I am on a spiritual path and learning to let go of my ego. I'm not, but I've kind of hit a plateau, and part of that is the change of medication that I'm on, which I see the medication and being limited by institutions and stuff as my 12th house. That's transforming. And so any insights that you have, my thinking is quite different from others because of various injuries. Was able to kind of reprogram it. Any I guess anything that comes to you about how to use air more effectively and to work through this this big shift.
What kind of work do you do?
I'm well, I'm a teacher of things like in basically helping people along spiritual paths, helping them to see where their values come from and get rid of their egos. And some energy work, but basically I don't have much as far as motivation or direction where to focus right now. And that's what I'm, with Uranus going through Aries.
How long have you had epilepsy for?
I was diagnosed at 8 months, and I'm going to be 50 this year.
And you're what?
I'm going to be 50 this year.
Yeah. So your whole life?
My whole life, yes.
Wow. And tell me a little bit of how does that manifest for you at this time, the epilepsy?
Well, I'm having grand malls about every 6 months. I've had 2 major head injuries. One, Linda, actually was in Port Townsend, or near when I lived in Port Townsend. And basically it kind of learning how to take care of myself, especially with using alternative health care and other forms of health care and managing the medications, is basically kind of rules my life. Is not, there's not a lot more I do, more I can do right now.
Yeah.
Except for to learn.
Except for what?
Except for to learn and to try to focus where I'm headed.
Will you tell me a little bit about where you sense you're headed and then what you kind of aspire and feel in your soul?
I don't know. I mean, actually, astrology has been one of the constants in my life, and I hope to do something with it, although it's a little complex in many aspects for some of the injuries that I've had.
Mm-hmm.
I am teaching today. I'm staying home from it because or I am becoming a teacher. I'm not sure how that's going to manifest. It manifests differently with each of us that's been trained. And I'm not sure where I'm going to be taking that. I know that I'm writing a book. But yeah, right now I'm in this big indecision as far as, okay, so what am I going to focus on when I do have extra time to focus?
Got it. Okay, I'm going to go into this for a moment. So I'll say two things. The first is a little more abstract, but it comes back to this idea of actually letting life hold the pieces for you, which again is just remembering that your own purpose and your own soul's calling isn't a thing you have to find and figure out. And the direction towards it is so fully contained within your community, within your people, within the environment. And so the first thing is really holding and kind of keeping this vibration of openness and curiosity and attunement to how all the pieces are speaking to you, so that you're not holding a subjective and very much false idea of I have a purpose or there's something I should be doing. And that's part of the issue with Uranus in Virgo in the 12th, opposite Chiron in the 6th, right? There can be this profound projection around doing and what I should be doing, and this underlying sense of something incomplete, something unresolved, something yet unfixed, something yet that needs to be resolved and healed. And I think the bigger medicine, this is the second piece for you, with your Chiron there, and it's powerful Chiron, retrograde at the last degree of Pisces, opposite your Pluto and your Uranus. Is actually giving yourself to be in service and, in a sense, relinquishing the need to find the right way, the need to almost come up with like a grand thesis or an answer or realization. And what I see for you, it's actually just giving and letting yourself explore more creatively, more openly, ways that you can be in service in an authentic way for you. And I think a part of this Chiron is like, as a healer, you receive more healing. It's when the healing happens in its own vacuum and you create an idea of now and then later. But giving grace to other people and performing miracles, actually showing them the power of love and unconditional love, and putting yourself in a place where you can really love other people. And you have your North Node in Taurus ruled by Virgo, Venus in the 12th. And your sun squares the nodes, and that sun, you want to focus that sun strongly through your North Node in Taurus. What this says is that really it's important for you that you're just giving to people, and that you're in a position where you can be serving them and loving them unconditionally, doing work, but the kind of work where it really opens your heart even more. And you heal and are blessed through the doing of it. But I think a big piece for you is like not looking at your life as a condition to fix so that then you can help, but actually seeing that it's all one at the same time. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. More the bigger picture, looking at bigger pictures, more than the details, which I have plenty of Sag in there. The letting go of the finding the right way of giving. And so it sounds like channeling the sun through Taurus, more Taurian ways of giving.
Yeah, that Taurus North Node is basically ease. You just get to serve people. With that Venus and Virgo in the 12th, it just reflects for you. You get to work with people in a way where you're supporting them in the ways that they're needed. And it's effortless for you. You don't have to try hard.
Mm-hmm.
It shouldn't feel strenuous or effortful. Rather, you should feel healthier and stronger the more you are in service to others.
Ari Moshe, unfortunately, we've come to the very end of the meeting, and we have another meeting waiting to begin.
Okay.
But you are welcome to carry on in next week if you wish, in another meeting, or the week after. But I'll leave that up to you.
I don't know where I'll be then, so let's just keep it here.
Okay. All right. Well, if you could stop sharing your screen, we can then all say goodbye and thank you.
Okay. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Fantastic. See you again soon.